Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. And now we start in South Africa, where that country is one step closer to bringing the two Indian businessmen brothers accused of state capture in the country to book. The extradition processes around the Gupta brothers, Rajesh and Atul, have finally gotten underway. In a press conference yesterday, South Africa's Justice Minister Ronald Lamola confirmed that the necessary documentation had been filed.
The brothers have been linked to looting billions of rands from state entities, revealed in the Judicial Commission of Inquiries into state capture. Lamola also updated the country on several other important extradition cases, but the processing of the Guptas was center stage. Joining us this morning is journalist and editor Dr. Candice Bailey to give us more on this. Good morning, Dr. Candice. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's head into the conversation this morning. The Gupta brothers were arrested in June. What is the latest development, if there's any, in this story?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. The Gupta brothers were arrested in June. What's happened is that the South African authorities had 60 days to process the actual application that needed to go to the UAE. And what in yesterday's press briefing, our minister was at pains to explain to us that they've now met that deadline, which would have been on August the 2nd, on Tuesday, August the 2nd. They've now been able to submit the documentation in both English and Arabic to the UAE Central Authority. And that extradition process can now get underway in the UAE, and we can, if it is granted, we can then see these brothers being brought to South Africa.
All right, quickly, just remind our viewers what we're talking about here. What are they accused of? What do they mean by state capture? And when is it very likely that they would be in South Africa?
So to start with your second question, it could still take a couple of months, according to the National Prosecuting Authority. We're not looking at having them here by next week. The processing could take a couple of months. They will be able to appeal this process in the UAE. We heard yesterday from the head of the NPA, Ms. Bahati, that their bail application they had applied for bail and their bail application has been denied, but they will still go through court processes in the UAE before they are brought here. In terms of what charges they're facing, money laundering and fraud at the center of what they're facing, and it's really related to various contracts in South Africa that really where they were looting millions and millions of rands from it. There are two specific cases, dairy farms in the Free State province in South Africa, that they are really at the center of, and that's where the NPA have focused their charges. But you will remember that the South African Judicial Commission of Inquiry, which ran for 3 years, picked up various contacts that the Guptas were involved in, that they used their political connections with the former President Jacob Zuma to get various processes speeded up, to overcome red tape, if I can put it that way, and to just sort of siphon millions off the government.
All right. Once we do have these men in South Africa, what's next? What happens to them? Is the South African legal authority ready to go to court? Take us through what the process is like in South Africa, especially when it comes to court cases of this kind.
So Advocate Bahati did explain to us yesterday that there are two specific cases that the Guptas are involved in. The one is the Nulane case, which actually is set down for trial in January 2023. So if the Guptas, once they are extradited to South Africa, they will head to court as part of several accused, and they'll face charges of money laundering and fraud under the Prevention of Organised Crime Act in that case. The second case, it relates to an Estina dairy farm in the Free State. And that case, although they have evidence around that case, they've issued warrants of arrest for those Guptas, but they have now lapsed. They'll have to rearrest them. They have to reissue warrants of arrest for them in that case. So there will be a delay. But essentially, to cut it short, two big cases, one that's already standing ready for trial in January 2023.
All right, quickly, just before you go there, other extradition cases that the minister also updated the country on. Is there anything interesting that people should know about? And also, how does the Gupta case rub off maybe on Jacob Zuma?
Well, to start with your first question, I think the minister yesterday was really keen to show the South African media that there's an entire process around extradition, and that it's not just a quick fix, and that it doesn't just take overnight to sort out. And in doing that, he then explained the extradition processes around other instances. One of which was the Malawian priest, Mr. Bushiri, who has been extradited to Malawi recently, and that's underway. And the other was linked to our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the recent scandal around his Phala Phala farm in Limpopo. You would remember that there's been a man fingered in that case. His name is David Emanuela, and he's from Namibia. The minister was asked questions around David Emanuela's extradition. According to the Namibian authorities, Mr. Emanuela, the application for Mr. Manuele to be extradited to Namibia had been ignored by the South African authorities. And yesterday, Minister Lamola said that actually the case hadn't been ignored, but they hadn't followed the correct processes. And what they needed to do is they then had been in a series of engagements with the Namibian authorities, explaining to them how they can go about this extradition process, what was needed to secure this extradition, and that's what they were now waiting for the Namibian authorities to file. So I think that was the other case that really was of interest to the media in terms of discussing extraditions in South Africa. In terms of how the case around the Guptas relate to the former President Jacob Zuma, we do know that our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has to make some recommendations around what happens with all the evidence that they've now collected in that State Capture Commission. There have been lots of indications that further investigations need to happen into former President Jacob Zuma. So I think them securing the Guptas and bringing them back could help them secure better evidence against the former president and what exactly his role was in terms of state capture and facilitating the crimes between the Guptas and the state.
All right. Dr. Candice Bailey, always interesting hearing from you, and we will continue to follow up on these stories. It's interesting to see the fight against corruption in South Africa and how it turns out. But looking forward to speaking with you again.
Thanks so much.